Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Addressing Intergenerational Trauma Among TANF Families. I'm James Butler, and I serve as one of the program specialists here in the Office of Family Assistance, Administration for Children and Families. We are excited to bring to you a great group of expert presenters to discuss this topic with you today. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly review how to use GoToWebinar. In the upper right corner of your screen is the control panel. You can minimize or enlarge the control panel by clicking on the orange arrow. By expanding the control panel, you can scroll to the bottom to type any questions you may have for your presenters. If your questions are for a specific presenter, please indicate that in your question. You can ask questions throughout the course of the webinar if you like, and we will have those questions will be monitored and we will address them during the Q&A session. I will now turn things over to the very capable hands of Dr. Nicole Bassard from ICF and TGC Consulting, who will carry us through most of today's webinar. Nicole?
Thanks so much, James. And first of all, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the country. Thank you for joining us for this very timely and relevant conversation. So I just want to, before we get into the content, I want to spend a little bit of time telling you about the great lineup that James just spoke of. And I want to get you in the room a little bit. So I want you to take a second and think about, as you are considering the topic that is on tap today, addressing intergenerational trauma among TANF families. What is it that is deeply meaningful, relevant? What draws you to this topic today? Not the general idea. What is relevant for you today? And if you could note that in the chat, just kind of put in a 2 or 3 word response. What are you listening for? What are you hoping to hear that you can build with or build on? So go ahead and hit the chat. Let us know what you are hoping to hear that you can use after we leave here today. Second thing that I wanted to touch on real quick, as James said, we're not just going to kind of give you a lofty conversation about this topic. We're going to give you a multi-dimensional look at this issue. So Dr. Chilton is going to open us up and give you that national and even historical perspective. So you're going to be able to get a good sense of what we are talking about and what we're not talking about today related to intergenerational trauma amongst our TANF families. Then we're going to come in and give you a bit of the data. What is the research and evidence saying to us about this topic, and how do we intervene with the greatest impact? Then we want to bring that third leg in the stool in and start talking about innovative practice. So we're going to be talking to some of our tribal TANF providers, as well as some of our state TANF providers, but what's happening out there on the ground and in the field that you can pick up and use in your neck of the woods. So if that sounds good to you, go ahead and put in the chat, #all-in. Okay, so that said, real quick, we're going to start off here with Dr. Chilton. As I said, she's going to give you this, the high-level historical piece here, just to make sure that you understand where we're starting with this issue. And let me please note, if you look under the handouts tab on your little command and control screen here in GoToWebinar, you will be able to download all of the speaker biographies. So let me have you go ahead. If you didn't access that, please do that. I want to go ahead and kick it over to Dr. Chilton, but let me just say this. She is a professor at Dornsey School of Public Health at Drexel University. She's the director of the Center for Hunger-Free Communities, and has founded Witnesses to Hunger, a participatory action program meant to ensure participation of Black and Latinx women who have experienced poverty. So let me begin by kicking it to Dr. Chilton to talk about intergenerational trauma, what it is, what it ain't, and what you can learn on and lean into as you begin to look at how I can make a positive impact. Dr. Chilton, let me give it to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I am #all in. So thanks for that invitation. Hello, everybody. I'm really honored and delighted to be here and talk with you, sort of give you some introductory ideas about intergenerational trauma. That's my email below. Feel free to send me an email and be in touch with me and our team. If you can click to the next slide. I wanted people to know that I'm tuning in from the area around Philadelphia, and this land originally belonged to the original peoples, the Lenni Lenape. I honor their elders, past, present, and future, and do everything that I can to stop contributing to the ongoing trauma, loss, and hardship associated with those stolen lands. And really, I think that they ought to get their land back and receive restitution and repair. That's a part of healing the intergenerational trauma. We can talk more in the Q&A perhaps, and click it to the next slide. So I also wanted to recognize that that there are so many people who have contributed to what I'm sharing with you today. All of us are standing on the shoulders of giants and regular people and our ancestors, and these are some of the folks that I work with and that have taught me and my team so much. And there's Ali and Kevin, and you'll see them later on in the lineup of speakers today. Click to the next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about the beginnings of how I got interested and started learning more about intergenerational trauma. I'll provide some definitions. I'll talk about the impact that trauma has on health and well-being. I'll talk about some of the characteristics of intergenerational trauma and land on talking about the importance of healing-centered approaches and justice-oriented program, hopefully to launch us into a deeper discussion of what's going on around the country. So if you can click to the next slide. Coming to you from the Center for Hunger-Free Communities in Philadelphia at Drexel University. And for 2 decades now, we've been exploring the relationship between economic hardship and health and well-being, especially among young children and their caregivers. And those are also the primary participants in TANF. So what we've looked at is the impact of food insecurity, housing insecurity, and energy insecurity on the health and well-being of young children and their families. How does such insecurity, precarity, and deep poverty impact the bodies and brains of children and their families? And we often talk about how toxic stress, or this type of stress of potentially being homeless, living in deep poverty, can actually have an impact on the brain, on health and well-being. If you can click to the next slide. One of the things that has become so important to us at the center is making sure we're understanding the experience of deep poverty from the perspective of those who are living it and who are trying to break out of it. And this is a photograph from Joanna Cruz through one of my programs called Witnesses to Hunger that's been ongoing for over 11 years now. And Joanna, at the time that we met her, was participating in TANF and was struggling to pay bills and was living without running water and without electricity. This is a photograph of her kitchen at the time. The photograph on the left is a doll, it's not a human being. But at the time, what she wanted people to know is that things can get so bad that one can be afraid to ask for help. I have come to know Joanna pretty well over the years and have learned so much about her experiences and what was really going on at the time. So yes, she came out on our surveys as housing insecure and energy insecure. But what was really going on, especially, was her experiences with deep depression, a feeling of inadequacy, deep and low self-esteem. And as I started to learn more about it, that's when I really took very seriously the concept of toxic stress. You can go to the next slide. And if you can click 2 more times, that would be great. Toxic stress is the strong and frequent or prolonged without adequate support. People can experience major stress, but if they get good support, they can transform it and come out of it and do okay. But if it's not taken care of, it can really affect a child's brain architecture and organ systems and create stress-related diseases. The last thing I wanted to say before I launch into the next set of slides is that I come to this as a beginner and with a lot of humility. I'm not an expert in trauma. I learned about food insecurity and hunger, but have started to learn how to uncover what that experience of trauma or the experience of hunger is, it's rooted in trauma in the family and across the generations. So I come to it with humility and as a beginner, and that's really, I think, the way that all of us should approach intergenerational trauma. If you can click to the next slide. Oftentimes people think about toxic stress as potentially an adverse childhood experience. I understand that on the call may understand and be very familiar with what we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Originally, it was envisioned as sort of a 10-question survey about what happened during people's childhoods before they were 18, having to do with abuse or neglect or household instability. Household instability means potentially witnessing a mother or stepmother being abused, or having someone in the family be incarcerated, dealing with substance abuse. And an example question from that original ACEs study is one on emotional abuse. Did a parent or another adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid and might be physically hurt? So this very straight up question about feeling like being emotionally abused actually is an indicator of what could happen later on in life as children grow up. They can have major problems with heart disease, diabetes, obesity, hepatitis, alcoholism, substance abuse, depression, and also low educational attainment, can't focus in school, and that also translates into poor job performance. And I know many of us who work with TANF participants are really struggling to help people find ways to succeed in the job, succeed in their families, have healthy relationships. What might be underneath those hardships is exposure to adverse childhood experiences. Click to the next slide, please. I wanted to show, just in case people were not familiar, if you can click just once. A lot of people had a hard time understanding that ACEs had something to do with food insecurity. Well, people think, oh, food insecurity, don't have enough food. Well, actually, no, that's an experience of major adversity. Click once, again, and again, and again. Actually, yep, two more times. And if you follow what's going on, what's happening as the bars become, click one more time, going from yellow to orange to deeper orange, or deep orange to the higher rates, the more, like for instance, if you look at emotional neglect, 56% of the people who reported emotional neglect during childhood were far more likely to report food insecurity. So food insecurity and adversity and trauma have a lot to do with each other. So that allowed me to start going in to talk to families about what their experiences were really like. What was going on? Why do adverse childhood experiences relate to deep poverty? Click to the next slide, please. I'm noticing that some of the slides aren't going through necessarily. Maybe click a few times until it looks like it's filled out, and I'll keep talking. So I would interview parents about what is that experience of adverse childhood experiences. They would often talk about their parents and what was going on for their parents. So in this example, you can see that Keisha was talking about her children being very low food secure. You can keep ahead, thank you so much. Her mother had problems with drug addiction and intimate partner violence. Her father was very absent, was often on the streets with drug addiction. The grandmother was a positive force, but also died during childhood, so couldn't deal with the trauma of the loss of a helper in the family. The great-grandmother also suffered from alcoholism. If you can click 2 or 3 more times, talking about Keisha's personal life with the generation that she was involved in, she had been sexually assaulted by her own cousin, her boyfriend, and she was in an abusive relationship with her boyfriend. One more click. The way that Keisha summed up her experience of how is it that her own childhood adversity relates to her own child being food insecure. She talked about just a total lack of love. She said, you know how you give each other hugs? I never grew up with that kind of love. What's important to recognize here is that food insecurity and deep poverty is not a simple snapshot in time about what's going on today, yesterday, last month, or last year. It's actually an indication of what has been happening over at least 5 generations. Click again. I wanted to give you all some, if you could click to the next slide, thank you. I wanted to give you some books that have been very helpful to me that help us to understand how trauma translates across the generations. feel free to press pause later on in the talk, if you're looking at the recording, but I wanted to indicate that some of the slides that I'm going to use next come from colleagues from Coming to the Table. And Coming to the Table is an organization of descendants of enslavers and those who were enslaved, and it's really taking America beyond the legacy of enslavement. Click next, please. I'm running low on time. Wanted to make it very clear that we're not talking about simply stress or even toxic stress. That's a term we use for young children, but we're talking about trauma, which is extremely severe. It's ongoing. You lose a total sense of control in your own body. You might lose a sense of who you are, what your identity is. An example of a trauma is a reaction to, for instance, being abducted, your tribe, your home, your family, your country, put on a ship, survive that trip across the Atlantic, and then to be enslaved. That is an experience of deep trauma. Click the next slide, please. So it's a reaction to when an individual or group experiences a terrible event or chronic terrible events. It touches multiple dimensions of life: physical, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual. Trauma, it produces terrible experience to life, body, experiences of terror, feelings of helplessness, loss of control, and a major problem with having a sense of meaning and order. Click to the next slide, please. It's important to remember that trauma affects all different types of experiences in the human form. It affects the brain, so it affects your cognitive, rational processing. It affects the limbic system. It affects people's ability to feel emotions, to express emotions, to even remember what's going on, what has happened, and it affects what's going on in the brainstem. It can affect the heart rate, breathing. A lot of people have heard about fight, flight, or freeze. Well, those can happen in the moment of the traumatic experience, but they can also be passed on throughout the generations. The tendency to take flight, to fight, and to freeze. Sometimes people talk about how trauma affects substance abuse, eating disorders, self-harm, depression, anxiety, or acting in, and then in other ways in acting out, abusing other, getting involved in gang and other kinds of criminal acts, or having a lot of risky behaviors. One of the ways of freezing is also considered to be dissociation, is cutting yourself off from your own self or freezing your emotions. And culturally, it can actually manifest in terms of apathy, lack of empathy, intolerance, either or thinking, and a propensity to try to hurt or punish other people. Click to the next slide, please. Many people have talked about a variety of types of trauma among Indigenous people. Some people have talked about this concept of the soul wound, and it goes way beyond the harm to the body, harm to culture. It's also loss of land, loss of spiritual connection, loss of identity in so many ways, and how that manifests in people's behaviors and how we survive that can be very complex. Also can be considered moral injury. There's multi-generational trauma, secondary or vicarious trauma, historical trauma. Joy Degree talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome. So there are many different entrees into trying to understand how trauma crosses the generation. To say climate trauma is a very big one, and we will be experiencing it more and more in the coming decades. If you can click to the next slide, and I'll try to take us to the finish. Please click past this to the next slide, and we can go straight into what Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart talks about as the multiple phases of unresolved grief. Historical trauma is the hardship that it gets generated, but also the inability to find ways to grieve and to address trauma or to transform that trauma. So, of course, genocide, during times of genocide, there's no time for grief. The colonization period, major massacres, forced starvation, loss of food and lifeways. It goes on and on up through the boarding school period, That affects parenting behaviors, forced relocation. I'd also have to say currently we're dealing with missing and murdered Indigenous women, which causes major harm across communities all around the Americas or Turtle Island, however you want to refer to it. Click to the next slide, and you can understand. I'm not going to touch this for too long, but what is coming through the experience among people who had been enslaved in this country, the terrible trauma of torture, humiliation, loss of family, forced marches, etc. Enslavement is a form of torture, is a form of very deep type of trauma. The effects of that, not being able to address it or redress, creates big problems in health, well-being, in our relationships. Same thing among white people who have been able to to harm others. What is it in a perpetrator that allows them to dehumanize others? That also is an indication that people have been traumatized, have been isolated from their own feelings, cannot experience empathy, cannot understand the humanity of others. So I'm sorry to go through this so quickly, but it's just so important to recognize that how trauma is not something that we're dealing with today. With COVID, we're dealing with that now. We're dealing with a massive traumatic experience right now, collective traumatic experience, but that our experience today will affect generations ahead if we don't work on finding ways to transform it. My last slide is to help encourage us to think about how, if you could click to the next slide, we need to make sure that we're focusing on resilience and the potential for healing from trauma. We can address people's lived experience, make sure that they have opportunities to tell their stories, to put their trauma in historical, social, and political context. We need to make sure that we're also seeking justice and accountability for perpetrators, and we need to start thinking more seriously about reparations and giving land back to its original owners. We have to also remember that in order to address trauma, we need to generate connection, find opportunities for joy, and again, justice. So I look forward to hearing everybody else's presentations today and to the Q&A. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. I'll stop there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Chilton. If you guys notice on your screen, remember we said we want to keep you in this conversation. So check the poll here. We want to get a sense of what kind of information would be most helpful to you in your work. So take a moment, and if you could let us know more information about research, evidence, what is it saying, strategies or tips to use with my clients, some of what Dr. Chilton either just laid down for us, information I can share with my supervisors and site administrators so that we're creating our agencies as buffer zones for trauma and intergenerational trauma in particular, as well as not just for our families, but staff too, training for staff. What kinds of information would assist you most? Let us know on the screen now, if you would. Strategies and tips, what to do when I see my families coming in. Great. If you haven't responded to that poll, please do so. If you're having any challenges technically, please note that in the chat so that we can come in and throw you a lifesaver. Okay, excellent. Now Dr. Chilton just came and set it off, right? She lets you know what this thing is, what it isn't, the historical impact of this. We're not just at this moment fresh, we're bringing generations to it. So now we want to, again, shift to this conversation about data, evidence, research, and looking at the compounded effect of COVID on intergenerational trauma. And to do that, as you can see, we've got Dr. Jessica Bartlett, Dr. Dana Thompson. They're going to come in and give you all some additional information of what are we learning, what have we learned, and what does that mean about what we can do. So let me hand it off to Dr. Bartlett, Dr. Thompson. You guys be looking and listening. What can I build with? What can I build on? Based on what Dr. Bartlett and Dr. Thompson are about to throw down for you. This fire can only get bigger and brighter. So I hand it to you.
Well, this is just fabulous facilitation, and thank you for having me. What a phenomenal panel and audience too. One of my favorite things to do is to talk about trauma with people who it isn't their first job, that they would think about around trauma. I thought we'd start with just a figure, which I find hard to grasp. I don't know about you, and this is already outdated, right? So at this point, about 420,000 people in the US have died from COVID-19. And when we think about the impact, of course, it's much higher, right? So over 25 million people have been diagnosed with COVID. And that doesn't even account for all of us who are feeling anxious about it, and certainly who have experienced trauma. So we know the impact of the pandemic is widespread, and many children and families are experiencing not just the physical toll that we hear about often on the news, but the psychological toll, and whether that's from constant changes and disruptions to childcare and school and work, but also through exposure to traumatic events that tend to increase during disasters and pandemics. So poverty for sure, domestic violence, parental substance abuse, and mental health problems in both parents and children. Okay, next slide, please. So this is a quick bar chart to show the impact of COVID on families with children are especially harsh. So as of December, 1 in 5 adults with children were just unable to feed their families. And that rate was significantly higher than among adults without children. So you're clearly working with a population that is highly affected by this pandemic. Next slide, please. So we don't have a lot of research on pandemics, as you might imagine, given how rare they are in our history, but we do have some substantial research on how natural disasters impact children and their families, and can extrapolate some to pandemics. And here you can see the potential impact of disaster-related trauma, which is clearly far-reaching, affects multiple domains of child and adult development, and this isn't even an exhaustive list, of course. And the symptoms can look really different in different families and depend on age. Young children, as Dr. Chilton was talking about, can experience kind of the toxicity of stress most, because they are right in the middle of major brain development. It's a very sensitive period. They are forming 1 million new connections per second. And all of that is influenced by experience, including trauma, which then can become toxic in the form of becoming biologically embedded. And we see then all the way into adulthood for some folks, mental and physical issues. That either kind of string along and get worse, or even some that don't appear until adulthood, like chronic heart disease or depression sometimes. And, you may see trauma look in a lot of different ways. It often looks like just very challenging behavior. In infants, it could look like, crying a lot, or clinginess, or severe stranger anxiety, or avoidance of a caregiver who's hurt them, trouble feeding, eating, sleeping, hyperactivity, aggression, right? The list could go on. And older children and adolescents tend to show it largely through, either kind of withdrawing from people and being depressed and anxious, or doing poorly in school, or the opposite of withdrawal, which is kind of acting out through risky behaviors like substance abuse, unsafe sex, etc. And unfortunately, one of the problems that we have in our society is that adults often react to traumatic stress reactions that are totally natural. That's how we human beings respond to trauma in particular. And it can look really messy, and so we can become very frustrated and not realize that actually what's happening is that kids and families are in distress. And one example of this that's really clear is that children who experience trauma are often mistakenly diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, because people are seeing the behaviors and not the underlying reasons for it. So I wanted to just pause here for a second to say a couple of important things. And one is that one should never expect a person working in TANF to be a counselor or therapist. And I say this when I work in early childhood programs or any programs that are not mental health based, that trauma-informed care, which we're going to talk about in a little while, Dana will, my wonderful colleague Dana Thompson will cover that. You know, is everybody's business, right? But it's not that it requires clinical skills. It requires knowing what your role is in the system and knowing that treatment absolutely should be left to mental health professionals who we refer to. But also feeling the hope, I find it hopeful that we all really can contribute to the healing and well-being of families who are affected. The other thing I just wanted to say quickly is it can be very tempting to ask families to describe what's happened to them, especially if they initiate the conversation. And one thing that we've learned the hard way, unfortunately, over the past couple of decades, is that we should never ask them to tell trauma stories. It's been shown to cause much more harm than good. And in fact, even evidence-based treatments have quite a long period of working with children, families, adults before they ever get into the trauma narrative, which is their word for the trauma story, and if they tell it at all. So that's just one thing to avoid. All right, next slide, please. So very quickly, I did just want to talk about definitions because oftentimes we have this mix of adversity and trauma. And the main point here is just that they're not the same, right? So not everybody who experiences adversity like COVID is traumatized from it. Of course, I would say most of us are pretty stressed out by it at different levels and are definitely having a hard time, and we're not at our best, and the people we're working with are not at our best. But for people who are traumatized, this really can be a triggering extra event. And so we really need to make sure that we are thinking about their resilience and how we can contribute to that. Next slide. Okay, so one of the most important ways to do this is to shift our mind frame and to move from this idea of what's wrong with you when we see difficult behavior to what happened to you, so that we understand what's going on in a deeper level, which allows us to be more empathetic. And then I would add also what's right with you, because so many of these families are experiencing multiple adversities and are in multiple service systems, most of which, spend time talking with them about everything that's wrong with them. And that doesn't feel good to anyone. So just the simple act of being able to point out strengths and appreciate strengths and protective factors that they can build on is a really critical piece of being trauma informed and helping people heal. Okay, next. All right, so some families experience a single adversity, but very commonly they experience multiple adversities, and actually you're more likely to experience multiple adversities if you've, and multiple forms of trauma if you've had it once. And so that's called cumulative trauma, and complex trauma is basically a form of cumulative trauma that typically involves problems in the caregiving system that starts very early in life. So maybe child abuse and neglect, or the loss of a parent, or separation, at the border is an example, and then continued traumatic experiences after that. And those are really associated with the most negative outcomes. And I think that's really important to understand because that's true of many of the families that you all are working with. And another thing is that it can be intergenerational, and as Dr. Chilton talked about, so I won't go into it. But especially when we're feeling critical or frustrated by the families we're working with, we need to bear this in mind. So I'm going to pass it over to Dana in just a moment, but just leave you with an anecdote from my own work where I really learned. When I was fresh out of graduate school, I was working for Child Protective Services, placing abused and neglected children in adoptive homes, and I read the file of what happened to these 6 kids in 3 different foster homes, and was just devastated by what had happened to them. Was very upset with the mother and thought, well, I gotta save this child. And then I read her file and realized she had the same history. And when I went to meet with her, she was sitting in the room, looked very mousy, and her perpetrator, her father, was sitting in the corner. And I just had this incredible realization that it is just not helpful to blame the victim or be critical, or that we need to summon our best selves to understand what people have been through in order to really focus on resilience and healing. So passing it off to Dana.
Thanks so much. And next slide, please. So as Jess mentioned from the start, the COVID pandemic and its associated economic crisis is a source of unexpected economic and societal disruptions that affect the health and well-being of children and families in ways that are really unique and very unpredictable. So some of the unique challenges that families face include risks to their own health and safety and the health and safety of loved ones. So for example, risks of contracting COVID, difficulty accessing health and mental health services, and heightened difficulties meeting families' basic needs. So for example, housing and food. Another challenge is a lack of predictability and stability, which we've seen with daycare, school, and business closures, but also due to reduced social connectedness and support, changes in rules and expectations, and also changes in family dynamics, which is associated with greater family conflict, more parental child abuse and neglect, domestic violence, and substance use disorders. So particularly for families who already had limited psychological, emotional, and economic bandwidth prior to COVID, and or are not able to access the supports and resources that they do have, the accumulation of these stressors can be easily overwhelming, and thereby tipping the scale of family and child health and well-being. Next slide, please. So as Jess mentioned, many low-income families are not just experiencing a single hardship during COVID. Child Trends recently conducted analyses that found that nearly half of all lower-income families with children in the US were not just experiencing one or two hardships, but were experiencing 3 or more health and economic hardships due to COVID. And these rates of multiple hardships were significantly higher for Hispanics and Black households. This accumulation of hardships can take a mental toll. A recent study by the Kaiser Family Foundation shows that over half of people who lost income or employment during COVID reported negative mental health impacts. Those rates were higher for those who were lower income. And we should also note that parents and other caregivers who have added responsibilities and added stressors are also experiencing especially high rates of mental health problems during COVID, which can compromise their parenting and their interactions with other adults. So as you see on the graph here on this slide, a CDC study found that symptoms of anxiety disorder was approximately 3 times higher a few months after COVID began than prior to the pandemic. And the prevalence of depressive disorder was approximately 4 times higher. And while this is adult mental health shown here, we should also note that children are also experiencing increased mental health problems. Now, as Jess and Dr. Chilton also mentioned, we don't yet have comparable findings on the extent to which families who are experiencing adversities are also experiencing trauma. But I think it's fair to assume that rates are on the rise, especially given the spikes in child abuse and neglect, in domestic violence, and substance use disorders that typically occur during disasters. Next slide, please. So fortunately, there are a number of ways that we can tip the balance of the scale towards resilience, namely through supports and services that are trauma-informed. For example, a randomized controlled trial conducted by Dr. Chilton and colleagues found that TANF participants who received 18 weeks of trauma-informed peer support in combination with standard TANF programming reported improved self-efficacy and reduced depressive symptoms despite high exposure to trauma and adversity. And we will hear from others on this webinar as well who have been involved in trauma-informed interventions. Next slide, please. So I want to talk for a moment about trauma-informed care and how it can directly apply to your work in supporting the well-being of families that are experiencing both poverty and the pandemic. So trauma-informed care is based on the idea, as Jess mentioned, that with the right support, not just mental health supports, that people can begin to heal from traumatic experiences, and that everyone who works with families who experience trauma can help in this process by applying the principles of trauma-informed care. So the definition of trauma-informed care developed by SAMHSA is among the most widely used, and it highlights what we call the 4 R's, namely that a program, organization, or system that's trauma-informed realizes the widespread impact of trauma and understands potential paths to recovery, recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma in clients, families, staff, and others involved with the system, responds by fully integrating knowledge about trauma into their practices and policies, and seeks to actively resist re-traumatization. Next slide, please. So what does this mean in your practice? So you can help by working to ensure that the concrete needs of the families you work with are met. Providing economic assistance to families is one of the most effective ways to address the negative effects of trauma because it reduces family stress and prevents further trauma related to living in extreme poverty. And child well-being, as we know, is largely dependent on parental well-being. So reducing poverty can actually help improve parental quality.
30 seconds,
In addition,
Dr. D. 30
thank
seconds.
You. In addition, both families and staff also need to feel physically and psychologically safe. Another important goal is trust building with families. It's also important to be collaborative. When traumatized individuals feel disempowered, it heightens their traumatic stress reactions. So ensuring that you partner with families as equals enhances their sense of empowerment. As I noted, empowerment, voice, and choice are also critical, and it's important to respect and be responsive to cultural, historic, and gender issues, both by being mindful of stereotypes and biases about people who are poor or use welfare, but also by tailoring services, so offering services in parents' preferred language. And next slide, which is our last.
I also just did that, Dr. D. All right now.
Thanks. I also just wanted to note that the well-being of children and families depends heavily on the well-being of parents, caregivers, and everyone these families interact with. So we can all help improve the odds of resilience by promoting the critical importance of self-care and by practicing it ourselves. Thanks so much. And I look forward to questions at the end of this session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. Thank you so much, Dr. Bartlett. You guys are on fire. So as you're thinking about this, you see the contact information from Dr. Bartlett and Dr. Thompson. I know I was crunching in there at the end. Such great information. Please make sure that you check your slides so that you can reach out to them for some additional information. Check out your screen real quick for poll number 3. How would you rate your level of familiarity with the strategies that address intergenerational trauma? So if you're super familiar, this is totally your jam, let us know. If you are very unfamiliar and you're kind of like, what do these words mean? I'm not really sure. Go ahead and let us know. If you're somewhere in the middle, maybe today was, your initiation. So let us know where you stand. Select one of the following there. As you do that, don't forget, please be writing down. What can you build with? For all the folks that said 55% of you in the previous poll said, listen, I need to know some more tips and strategies. What can I put into practice like yesterday? Well, listen, these presenters have been throwing some fire down. So you got some good things to build with. Keep note. Make sure you're keeping your own notes so that you have a nice little playbook at the end of our time together. Related to your level of familiarity, about a third of you are somewhat familiar. A few of you, actually 12%, are saying, hey, this is my jam. I know this gig. So as we're working through this, if you're hearing information from our presenters that are tipping off some things for you to share with this group, please put it in the chat. Don't be stingy, be generous, share, okay? All right. So now for all of you, again, that 55 that said, hey, I want some practical tips and strategies, this is about to be your, listen, we about to pull out the stops. So we have some folks on the front line that are engaging and interacting in an impactful way with our families. And so we want to start with Dr. Marla Conwell and Amber Hoyt. They're going to be talking about what do these strategies look like and which ones are they finding and practices that they're utilizing with our tribal and Native families throughout the country. So again, golden ears on, be listening for what you can build with, build on. And don't forget, you've got their bios that you can download, in the link here. So without any further ado, Dr. Marla, do you want to go ahead and get us kicked off here?
Absolutely. Good morning. Sinsayath, Itten, Chehalis Chin, Marla Conwell. My name is Dr. Marla Conwell. I'm an enrolled Chehalis tribal member, and I'm working with my colleague Amber Hoyt from the South Puget Intertribal Planning Agency to present the Positive Indian Parenting Curriculum. Amber is our home visitor for the Kitsap County, and she has presented this curriculum and developed these slides. I would like to note that Indigenous people and tribal members do not always prefer to refer to themselves as Indian. Sometimes they prefer tribal members, Indigenous, or Native peoples. So please keep that in mind when you're working with these types of populations. And I'd like to turn it over to Amber. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amber Hoyt. As Marla said, I am the Healthy Families home visitor for Kitsap County. I also work directly with a TANF program. Next slide, please. The Positive Indian Parenting Curriculum was developed by the National Indian Child Welfare Association. I don't know how long ago, but it was developed in collaboration with several tribal elders across the nation. Next slide, please. The first session is called Traditional Parenting. The historical child rearing practices have a great deal to teach us as parents today. These sessions will explore some traditional practices and their importance. So a little bit about the curriculum and the why. Indian parenting has a unique history, and this really addresses it and kind of gives parents, especially those in urban communities who have become disconnected from their culture and their tribes, it gives them a sense of where they come from. So there are cultural strengths that parents can rely on, and these practices provide a sense that they are good and strong, and it kind of addresses those ACEs. And they can learn from others and reflect on themselves. Another important note from my trainer was that this can apply to anybody. You don't have to be from a tribe, you don't have to be Native American to be able to identify with these, with the curriculum. Next slide, please. So the first part of the session is where we learn to parent. Parenting education is very new, and a few people have an opportunity to receive help outside of their own family. So this particular session really helps parents to kind of think about their own experiences growing up and where they learned how to parent and where their parents learned how to parent and their grandparents, and how what they face, they have to consider where they learned to parent individually and culturally. So before European occupation and colonization, parenting ways were passed down by elders to children. However, during the removal period and the boarding school period, this was really kind of lost. So parents learned the spare the rod, spoil the child ethic from the Europeans, and it became kind of a harsher parenting style because children weren't being raised by their own parents. Next slide, please. Boarding schools, as I mentioned, where they interrupted the normal cycle of children learning to parent from their parents. Relocation and other government termination policies resulted in the loss of extended family support, traditions, customs, beliefs, and even languages. It tore families apart. And it even removed a lot of children from their tribes. Even now, institutional discrimination frequently strips Indian parents of their dignity and denies them their culture. Rules previous to this were clear and consistent and often developed by the community. However, today, that isn't exactly how things go. Parents have different expectations, which are not as clear, and Native parents often lack the benefit of learning the traditional ways or accessing the support of extended family. We must examine our own history when considering where people learn to parent, and we must look to our experiences to identify where we learned to parent. Reclaiming our heritage is a choice. To make that choice, we must look at earlier generations. Next slide, please. The second session is Lessons of the Storyteller, which talks about the role of storytelling in parenting and child development. Next slide, please. So when parents treat their child with respect, they can also expect to be treated respectfully. In this way, they can teach their children to listen with their hearts and eyes as much as they do with their ears. So they use storytelling as a way of teaching. With the heritage of kindness and patience, positive Indian parents can tell their children how they feel without criticizing or putting them down. Kind of like was mentioned before about what's right with you and what happened to you. This is really what this curriculum does, is addresses those questions. When parents speak to their children this way, it avoids a lot of the rebellion we see today. Next slide, please. The third session is Lessons of the Cradle board. This is actually a really good one, which talks about how children learn to develop their skills beyond the physical. Next slide, please. Traditional parenting was based on an understanding of child development. So the respect that was a primary element of this positive parenting approach included respect for the child's growth. Today, the old ways teach us that the needs of the child change as they grow, and that a child must be ready to handle a skill before they can learn it. Modern theories about child development do not contradict what Native culture has known for centuries. Parents can help their children along the path of growing by allowing them the chance to develop new skills while recognizing a child's readiness to learn. And parents must walk before they can run, but also need an environment in which it is safe to walk. Next slide, please. The fourth session is Harmony in Child Rearing, and this really talks a lot about parents designing and guiding their environment to create harmony, both in their home and in their family. Next slide, please. So harmony refers to the balance and relationship between all things. Respect is the most important part of keeping harmony. When children were encouraged to freely explore the world and figure out their relationship with their environment on their own. Next slide, please. And the fifth session is traditional behavior management. That is exactly how it sounds. Next slide, please. In this session, we cover several traditional parenting methods from many different tribes, and most of this can come from any tribe. And we usually will have a discussion in each session that can be very, very fruitful for a lot of parents, talking about both their experiences and what they struggle with, as well as what their successes are. And And it helps a lot of parents who are struggling to find new ideas based on these old ways. There are only examples. If it's best if you can discover more about the parenting practices from your own tribe, but really these sessions really open up the conversation to incorporate things from many different tribes and other cultures. The point of this session is to teach parents to look at the old ways and what they teach us about parenting and behavior management. This is a session where some traditions that will be discussed may seem harsh. It is important to remember that these ways often had built-in limits, and we must examine whether they may have been more appropriate then than now. In this session, it is most important to focus on the best teachings from the old ways. We have all learned many negative parenting behaviors from the non-Indian world, and it is important to look at the ways that existed before colonization. Next slide, please. So the 6th session is Lessons of Mother Nature, which talks about how parenting can also have or Mother Nature can have a big impact on how we teach children about the world. Exploring how Indian families traditionally taught living skills, how nature was used as a teacher, and how nature's examples taught people to reinforce relationships with one another, cope with hardships, and find strength is the point of this lesson. Next slide, please. The rationale is to help parents gain insight into the ways cultural teachings from the past encourage living skills development. So by applying these ideas to modern life, parents can help their children develop a sense of harmony and strength in the world around them. Next slide, please. The 7th session is Praise in Traditional Parenting, which talks about how to use praise instead of criticism to guide children through life. Next slide, please. Applying the old ways to modern parenting, parents can encourage desirable behavior in their children through praise. Praise is a message of approval, also called positive reinforcement, as you may know. Focus on and encourage a behavior you like, either verbally or non-verbally, ensuring the child recognizes the desired behavior. Give full attention to the child's desired behavior at that time and as much as possible. Offer a comment or nonverbal action that shows approval or admiration. And just this particular session really talks a lot about what parents can do to show praise and to give praise and what it means to do so. Next slide, please. The last session of the curriculum is Choices in Parenting, which kind of talks like an overview of the rest of the sessions, what parents have learned and how they can apply it to their parenting. Next slide, please. So it also discusses what children face today as well as what parents are facing. In the past, parenting focused on preparing children for adulthood in a world that was very different from today. The environment required that children learn the lessons of survival for both the good of the group and themselves. Today, children must face life in two cultures. Cash has replaced subsistence as a means of survival, so they're not living off the land anymore. In most cases, education is more formal and expectations are unclear. And parents on the same side of that coin have been changed by American and Native history, and now Native parents have how Native parents approach child rearing. Most have been raised with the influence of two societies with very different and often conflicting approaches to life. With more than 400 different tribal groups, many have become lost to the old ways. This creates confusion and a wavering sense of self for many parents. When parents are uncertain of their identity, they cannot give their children a strong sense of identity. By learning about culture and coming to terms with what it means to be Native parents, they develop their own strengths and can begin to help their children. Next slide, please. So that is the end of the curriculum. I would just like to note that with the SPEPA Healthy Families program, it is part of my job to not just present this curriculum, but we also use the Parents as Teachers curriculum for our home visiting. And so we follow up with the home visiting using this curriculum as well as the Parents as Teachers. And it really kind of gives parents a little bit better of an idea of their culture and how to approach their parenting and their family well-being. And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for everybody being here and letting me present. Thank you so much.
Amber, thank you. Is Dr. Marla going to add anything in, or are we transitioning straight to the next team?
Good morning. We could transition straight to the next team, and if there are any questions, we'll follow up at the very end. But thank you, Amber. That was wonderful.
Excellent. Excellent. There you are, Allie. You're up. And Kevin, oh, you're muted, Allie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is Allie Huxta, and I'm here with Kevin Thomas. We're co-directors of the Building Wealth and Health Network. And we're going to go into our presentation in a second. But one really important piece about healing trauma, whether individual, intergenerational, or collective, is to take breaks and to be in our bodies. And so everyone to look away from the screen. Stretch your arms if you need to. Don't look at the screen, and look away, look behind you. Both directions. Look to your right, your left. And make sure to breathe. Because spending a lot of time on Zoom like this is really not great for our minds and our bodies. So I just wanted to take that moment, and this is something that we do in our virtual online classes. And so I just started off with a tool that you could use with your groups as well. It's called a mind body break. I'm going to send it over to Kev, and he's going to kick us off.
Thank you, Allie. All right, next slide, please. All right, so coming from the Building Wealth and Health Network, which is part of the Center for Hunger-Free Communities, I want to thank Allie for giving us a mind body break to get us started. I want to thank Dr. Chilton for presenting earlier, talking about intergenerational trauma. And then I'll get into a little bit about what we are. Now, the Building Wealth and Health Network is a program that works with agencies that are part of the welfare system, and partly within it, to combine financial literacy and trauma-informed self-healing. Next slide, please. And the reason we do that is because the time that we're all dealing with right now is a lot. There's not a lot of places in which you can get the understanding that money and life aren't separated. Generally, when you take a financial literacy course, you get how to build your credit and how to save money and how to buy a house. But those are emotional decisions. And a lot of the financial decisions that we make are based upon the experiences that we had. And for some of us, that includes our traumas. So there's no real way to talk about your financial behaviors and train your financial skills without being willing to deal with the occurrences that you've had in your life. The combination of the two is hard to come by if you were looking for a space, one that's therapeutic and allows for an outlet. We can still gain those skills. So we created one. That's what the network was designed to do. Next slide, please. All right. So what is the network? The network is a trauma-informed, healing-centered financial literacy program that integrates emotional and peer support to promote self-efficacy and resilience in traditionally under-resourced communities. We're currently running virtual courses in 8 counties in Philadelphia and southern central PA. And we're looking to expand nationally over the coming years, that is. Next slide. So the definition of trauma-informed care. We've talked about this a lot on the the webinar so far, so I won't get too heavy into it, but I will read the definition. Trauma-informed care is not trauma intervention. You may not even mention trauma as to the client. Your space has the capacity to work with the behaviors and needs that arise from people who experience trauma. And that's more about the space that we create. So we can move on. All right, definition of healing-centered engagement. So Sean Jenwright from San Francisco State University, a tectonic shift in how we view trauma, its causes, and its interventions. Its strength-based advances a collective view of healing and recenters culture as a central feature in well-being. All right, next slide. All right, and I'm sure that most folk have seen these numbers before. These are the challenges that families and participants who are receiving TANF face. Nationally, 33% report work-limiting health conditions. 43% reported disability. 74%, an astounding number, report intimate partner violence. And that's nationally. Statewide, 17% of children are in poverty, and that was pre-COVID. In Philadelphia, in our CareerLink network members reported, and this is self-reported, 52% have seriously seen someone wounded. I should say, I'm sorry, 52% have seen someone seriously wounded by an act of violence, and 51% had a parent in prison. So these are circumstances that most people leave at the door when they go to work, when they go into school, when they go to drop their kids off at daycare. It's virtually impossible to be yourself when you have to leave the conditions and the experiences that you had at the door. And if you can't be yourself, it's really hard to be who it is that you need to be at work or at school. And also to be in the right frame of mind as you drop your kids off for school. Next slide, please. So what we do is we break our program into 16 self-empowerment financial sessions. You have a financial coach and a self-coach, a life coach in the room. And we start off with community meeting. And that's just our way of touching base and making sure that we understand where everybody is who's in the space. We all have different mornings. We all have different nights. And sometimes you need to get that out before you can really start your day. We recognize that not everybody has really mentally started their day yet, even though they're in front of us. A lot of times you're just on autopilot in the morning. You don't have that second to just breathe and say how you really feel. So we spend time doing that every day. After that, we get into the financial lesson. The financial lesson can be any of the topics that I brought up before, but the difference in the way that we treat financial literacy is we don't just talk about the financial side of it. Every example, every part of it is designed with our client in mind, but also addresses what life is like while you're doing these things. The fact that if you have kids and you're moving from an apartment, possibly a PHA apartment, something that was provided by, it's difficult to take that step into home ownership. It's not just an issue of whether or not I can get my credit right and then I can get the money in the bank. There's a level of responsibility that, I don't know that I'm comfortable with my children. If there's risks that I don't want to put my children into, that, and really impact that decision. And it'd be silly to talk about buying a home without talking about all of those emotions that go along with it. So after that, we take a break, and then we get into our self-empowerment lesson, which really is tied to the financial lesson. So a lot of what I went over just a second ago is part of what we'll talk about in that self lesson. Then there's also the opportunity to have one-on-ones with your coaches. And we also provide the space before and after class for peer support. If you want to get in early and meet with folk, or you can meet with them after class on your own, but if you need a space, you can use ours as well. Next slide. All right, cool. And these are some of the classes that we offer. Intro to Individual and Collective Healing and Trauma, Facing Your Fears and Your Credit. One of my favorites, because you'd be surprised how many folks are afraid to look at their credit. Behind Budgeting and Saving, Healthy and Unhealthy Relationships, Taking Your Money and Your Power Back, and that's about oppressive systems. Mindfulness and Managing Stress. That's 6 of the 16 sessions that we offer. Next slide, please. So those pictures don't normally look like that, but I assume that's because those two coaches aren't on the camera with you. So you see me and Allie, and those other two coaches, Janae and Brad, also work with us.
Kev, that's just a, I don't know what happened to the pictures. They weren't like that before.
Okay, cool. So it wasn't intentional. Well, then if it was a mistake, it was actually done pretty well because it saved your presenters' pictures. But anyway, our empowerment coaches teach a bunch of different topics, whether it's credit, budgeting, student loans, rental assistance, first-time home buyer, starting your own business, or any of the financial issues that arise. You can also get emotional support. You can also get that therapeutic presence and referrals to longer-term services and mental health support. Any emotional or personal need that arises and can help address any barriers. One of the bigger things that we focus on is goals, but not goals from a perspective of just coming up with a list and how do you get it. More like a well thought out goal, one that considers everything that could go wrong and all of the stuff that could go right as well. One-on-ones are a real great way to work with your coaches, and they give us some personal time with each member. Next slide, please. My favorite. So part of the program, and I'm surprised I haven't mentioned this yet, we have a commercial we could have showed you guys, but we offer match savings accounts. And this is part of the way that we're able to help address the issues of intergenerational poverty. One of the things that's really hard to do is save money, especially when you don't come up in an environment that teaches financial literacy or has good saving practices. I know in my household coming up, we didn't have enough to really save. And what we did have, we didn't necessarily know how to manage. Growing up on the system, you're not going to be around as many financial habits that you would like to have as an adult because it's just hard to do that while you're on a system. The system doesn't let you save with so much money. And it's very hard to fix your credit when you're not allowed to have money in the bank. Nonetheless, one of the other difficulties is you don't grow up in a household with people who have good credit, so you don't learn habits that are associated with it. One of the first ways that you establish good credit and you start establishing good financial behavior is with the savings account. So we start the process along with our members. We're able to waive any debt that's owed to any other bank. We have the relationship with our bank that allows us to do that. And we'll help you save up $20 a month. So if you save 20, we will match 20, making your 20 into 40. If you save 10, we will match 10, making your 10 into 20. And we'll do that for a year. But that, in addition to the incentive that we give you for coming to class, because you're able to get a $10 incentive for each class you attend, can have you up to $480 in the bank by the end of the year. And for a lot of our members, that $480 turns right into a secured card, that turns right into a regular credit card, and the additional money in the bank that goes along with that. And that's how you start getting that pathway on to starting that business, because that's something else that a lot of members do when they get their secure card is pay for the licensing fee, the LLC fee of $125 to start their business. Something as simple as saving in our program up $20 a month can get someone better credit and then on their way as an entrepreneur within a little time as a year. I know I didn't learn saving until I became an adult, well until I actually became a banker. So helping our members start that process early and teach it to their children early puts an adult that's able to save, an adult with good credit in the household, and that's one of the biggest ways that you can change intergenerational poverty, creating an environment of sound financial literacy. Next slide, please. Lotus points. It's another incentive that we offer as part of our program. So we realized that those 5 behaviors that you see on the pie chart allow our members to have the best outcomes while they're within our program. If they're able to attend, complete the homework, which is usually like a sentence or two. If they're able to come early, not make any withdrawals, and are able to make deposits, then they will have a decent amount of success in our program. So we give out points for those. And there's some other things that we give out points. We make it site specific. So if we're working with a certain site and there are things that they need to incentive, we structure our Lotus points around that. But members turn those in for entrepreneurial classes, passports, textbooks, laptops, facials, massages, gift cards. What we generally say is anything that'll help you start that process that you're trying to start and help you along the way with your goals. So whether it is just paying for the fictitious name or the LLC, or paying off some debt that's on your credit card so that you can get into a better situation. All of that stuff becomes available. But we don't only emphasize goals. We recognize that you being you, like many of the folk on the call have said, is just as important. So self-care, facials, massages, taking care of things like uniforms. Takes a load off of a parent's mind before school starts in September. Next slide. All right, cool. And our outcomes. Yeah, you can go on to the next slide. I love looking at this slide. All right, so in phase 2 of our program, we started out as a RCT, and then we moved on to phase 2, which was in West Philadelphia. We were recruiting directly out of the CAO office, the county assistance offices in Philadelphia. So, and members would come to us once a week. This was when the class was being administered once a week for 16 weeks, still 16 sessions. What we found is that baseline, 48% of participants reported being food secure. By the end of the 12-month intervention, 69%, up 21% over the 12 months. Caregiver health went up from 60% to 70%. Depressive symptoms, which is our measurement for depression, went down from 55% to 47%. And employment went from 17% to 50%, largely because we partner with an agency that is interested in employment. And my favorite of the 5 as a financial coach, of course, is the savings account. So only 29% of people, members who signed up for our program reported having an active savings account. By the end of the 12 months, it was 67%. And while we do offer a savings account as part of our program, you know, nobody makes you use it 12 months later. So this is just a testament to what our members will do. And we can look at this and show that members were able to become more household food secure, and we didn't give out any food. Caregiver health went up, and we're not physicians. Depressive symptoms went down, and while we provided therapeutic space, we don't do any clinical direct therapy. Employment went up, and we don't do job placement. And yeah, we do the savings account, and we'll also match it, but we don't create the money that you put into it to match. That's our members doing that over time. Next slide. Yep, and during phase 2 as well, we were able to show financial capability increased from 4.49% up to 5.54% for members who have full participation in our program. And that's over 3 months. That's not even over the full 12-month period. And then our scores that you see on the charts are reported at 6 months. The dotted line are members with low or no participation, and that heavy orange line are members with full participation. And
bring us home, KT. Bring us home. We're coming up on that line.
Oh, wow. All right, next
Kev,
slide.
Can I actually take it from here since we're not going to get to my portion?
Absolutely. Go.
Yeah, if you could just go to the next slide, Steve. And the next one. I just want to make the point. Oh, come on, the camera. Here we go. So yeah, we have a lot more about specifically how to address trauma, and we actually can offer training on that. So if you're interested, just contact us after for training on how do you work with clients who've experienced trauma. But I want to the question of how do we do this? How do we increase employment, food security, participation, and savings without handing out money and food and offering therapy? And one of the biggest things is through social capital and building that network of peer support. And intergenerational trauma, individual trauma, and collective trauma gets perpetuated when people are isolated. And a lot of people in TANF are isolated and on their own. And sometimes, and they come to the Career Link or the EARN looking for support and resources, when a lot of times the person sitting next to them in the waiting room could be the biggest resource. And so what we do is we're all cohort-based model, and so we make sure that people are connecting with each other and they're asking each other, what can we do for each other for support? The network isn't just the coaches, it's everybody in the space. And I really want to say, as a tool for you and your programs, is to get members interacting with each other more, and to have fun, and to celebrate, and to focus on joy and focus on healing. And we have more of a presentation about that definitely contact us to talk more about it. But through increasing social capital, so having people meet new people who connect and understand what they're going through, and see themselves in others, reduces depression. And the reduction of depression is how we get all our outcomes, the outcomes that Kevin listed. So it's specifically the focus on mental health and the focus on being trauma informed that actually gets you your outcomes. And so if you're saying, well, I'm not a counselor, but I still want to get somebody a job, or I'm not a counselor and I want to get somebody this resource, they might not be able to even use the resource or have the job until they have that mental health support or they have that peer support and aren't isolated. And so I really just urge that all kinds of healing happen in the body, but they happen around other bodies that are healing. And so we need to be around each other. We need each other in this time, whether it's virtually or whether it's in person.
30 seconds, Allie, sorry.
Yeah, that's good. And so if you could actually, I'm not going to show any more slides, but just to really make the point that being trauma informed and healing centered is creating this space where people are coming, they're excited to come to, they're having fun, there's laughter and there's joy, and you're talking about what is actually happening on a collective level, trauma-wise and individually. And so if that's talking about, when we worked in North Philly, we talked about redlining, which is housing discrimination that started in the 30s. If we're working with people in South Central PA, we're talking about the opioid crisis and how that happened, because people will start to blame themselves if they're not taught the actual policies and histories behind the things that are causing collective traumas. And so, yeah, I just wanted to leave it there that healing will happen once we address the harm that has been done. And so that's what we do at the network. We address the harm that happened and we bring about healing and joy.
Well, and Allie and Kevin, here's where I want to transition to next. We've got some Q&A time coming in. We got a stack of questions, but for what you didn't get to present, be thinking about what's on your mind and heart that you want to throw in or circle back to, or that's really essential that we just didn't have time to cover that you want to make sure to share with people. So I'll go ahead and start on the Q&A, and then we still get at least a little bit of an opportunity for you guys to come back and cover the things that we just didn't have time to cover. Okay. I know it's a rough two-step, but we're going to try and make it work. We're going to try and make it work. Okay. Thank you, Allie and Kevin, holding it down from Philly. I love it. I love it. Okay, so here's what I'd like everybody to do. First of all, as Allie kicked us off, Steve, you can hold that slide up or you can put us back at the beginning. I don't know if there's a closing slide for the whole thing, but let me ask everybody, first of all, take a deep breath. If you've been taking notes feverishly, thank you, Steve, or the Q&A slide is fine. Shake out your hands, take a nice big breath, just, give your shoulders and arms a rest. Take a second, take a look at the questions that you have. And I have a stack that has come in already, so I want to start with those, but please let us know, keep firing those questions to us. If we can't get to all of them during our session here, we can certainly come up with a way to get those answered and shared with you all after our session today. So before I move forward, though, I have to say, Dr. Dana and Allie, listen, you guys got people in the chat. They're already slapping my wrist for cutting you off. So to your point, I know you guys were offering awesome information and practical strategies, and I had to cut you off, but I beg your pardon, and I thank you for extending grace. So, okay, here's where I'd like to start. This is what I have up here first. A question that came in. What are some of the ways to maintain confidentiality, and especially when working with youth and delivering trauma-informed care virtually while clients are still in their homes? And you guys, whoever wants to jump on that first, you can feel free to turn your camera on, unmute your mic, and respond to that question. That would be great. And while you're thinking about that, I can repeat the question. Maintaining confidentiality, especially when working with youth and delivering trauma-informed care virtually while the youth are still in their homes.
So I can respond to this not as an expert, because I think maybe we're all new to this. We just started running our program virtually across South Central Pennsylvania. And we have to start with a set of guidelines. And one of the guidelines is to make sure you're in a private, quiet space if you can. If you can't, we just have to understand that. And I think that this is a big question, actually, even for a lot of mental health providers as well, especially with groups and people being able to see each other's families like in the space as well. But we have a set of guidelines, and one of them is to be in a quiet, confidential space, and that everything that happens in group stays in group. But we also have, and this is the key part, we have something called a systems check. And so when any time we think that the group isn't following the guidelines, not in like a slap on the wrist, but just in like a, hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable about that person that keeps walking through your room, any guideline that's not being followed gets to be checked by the whole group. And so you can check the confidentiality, at least as far as to keep the trust in the group. You can have guidelines that specifically say it. Other than that, it's really hard. I mean, that's all I can offer. I don't know necessarily. We're still grappling with how do you control the uncontrollable, which is people's home lives and different things like that.
Allie, before you pop off, we've got a couple questions, but no, Dr. Bartlett, come back so you can respond to that. We'd love to bring that in to you.
Sure, I was just going to add that's a lovely response, and I was just going to say, oftentimes we work on this at the prep stage, right? So if we're arranging a call, we talk ahead of time about confidentiality and wanting to be respectful of everybody in the household. And so we really want to create a private room, and that doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be a closet, it could be wherever people can talk from. And so just again, kind of going back to the voice and choice piece, to let people really understand, and predictability, right? What's going to be happening, what we're going to be asking. And so they even have a sense of, what they would want to keep confidential from other people in their family.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bartlett. Allie, I want to come back to, I have a couple of questions for you all at the network. First of all, are clients clients of the network eligible TANF participants that are referred by social services? And can folks from other states participate in the Building Wealth and Health Network offerings? So is there a local referral system for TANF folks? And can folks outside of the state of Pennsylvania participate in the network?
So if Kev wants to come back on, just so you can see who's this, but as far as our answer is, depends on our partners. So right now we are working with South Central PA Workforce Board, and we recruit directly in their EARN orientations. In Philly, we're directly recruiting with Work Ready, and so the people that go through Work Ready, we're going to their workshops and promoting the program. We want to work with as many people that want to work with us and want to collaborate and come up with a program that will work best for your area. You want to add to that, Kev? Oh, you're muted, Kev.
Thank you. Yeah, you did a good job. You gave the answer to the second question, and I'll address the first one. Yes, members of the network are TANF eligible participants. And we actually recruit from either the EARN centers or the CAL offices. So they weren't necessarily referrals sent to us, although it could work that way.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Second question here. Someone says, one response I often hear from leadership, and this is for all of our panelists, is that trauma-informed care takes too much time. What are some ways to address reluctance from leadership that address this concern that trauma-informed care is just too time-consuming? Come on, fire starters. Y'all was throwing down some good stuff. I know y'all got some stuff to say to this. And you can turn your camera on and unmute whenever, whichever of you wants to respond.
I love the question. This is Mariana again. The issue about taking too much time is an invitation to think about what are you really trying to accomplish? Because if you're trying to help people to have a better life and to be more capable in the world and loved and self-sufficient, then that takes time. And the best way to do it is through trauma-informed care and healing-centered care. So this question about time should be pushed back to those who are saying it takes too much time. I think you would want to go underneath. What is the goal and what's the problem with taking some real time? Because what you in doing by not doing trauma-informed care is basically pushing people through your system, and all they're going to do is come right back around and come into the system again. The idea is to break the intergenerational trauma transfer and to break the transfer of poverty, the transfer of hardship, and to generate joy, generate resilience, connection, and community. That takes time. It's a beautiful investment. I can't think of anything better.
Can I give an example of how it actually can make things faster?
If you can do it really quickly, because I am
Yes.
getting kicks under the table that I'm
okay.
taking.
Okay, no, that's cool. I'll stop.
No, if you can do it quickly, break it down.
Okay, so we do something called community meeting at every all of our staff meetings. So imagine where I have 12 people, it's your whole staff. It's not even members, we're not talking about clients. And everybody goes around and talks about how they're feeling, what their goals are for the meeting, who they can ask for support. And then we ask some kind of silly question like, what's your favorite cartoon when you're a kid? When we do that, we're more productive in the business meeting because we're all coming back to a place where our bodies are settled, relaxed, and ready to learn and get to business. Whether everyone's like trying to deal with your emotions that you're trying to push down, by like getting it out in the forefront, you can actually get to business faster. And so I just wanted to make that point.
Got it. Oh, that's fabulous. I'm glad you did that right quick, Allie. That's a good one. Okay. Let me check in with my team. I believe we are at time. And I still have a few questions. So here is what I would love to do. Can somebody just verify for me if we're at time? If we are, let me just simply say this. Unanswered questions will be shared with the presenters and answered will be posted on the PeerTA network. Okay, so check out PeerTA after today. And that's where questions that I didn't get to, don't worry, and ain't nobody trying to do you wrong. We're gonna take care of you. We'll go ahead and post it to PeerTA. And some additional information as you see on your screen. Also, let us know any future topics. If this really kicked off a firestorm of other good ideas, other resources and strategies that you need, or you'd like some of our presenters perhaps to spend a whole hour and a half talking about, maybe you want to bring Dr. Dana back and Dr. Bartlett to kind of really explode out what we're learning from the researcher, Dr. Mariana, about how to interrupt this historical and intergenerational trauma for the whole family. Let us know. PeerTA at blhtech.com. Let us hear from you. This is an opportunity for us to learn together, grow together, serve together, lead together, because this is truly impacting us all. So with that, I would just like to say, please, even though I can't see you, please give a big round of applause to our presenters and our co-presenters, which was you. You guys were, letting us know you were here, you were paying attention, you were giving us some good energy. We appreciate you for that. And we'll be sure to wrap back up with you. So with that, I will mute myself. Steve, stop laughing, I know how. And I will hand it back over to you all to shut us down.
Thank you, Nicole. This is James again. I just want to reiterate all of what Nicole just said. So thank you to all of our presenters. And Nicole, you did a phenomenal job as always. And of course, we wouldn't be able to do this if it were not for all of you joining us today. So we thank you for that. Again, as a reminder, webinar resources and speaker bios can be downloaded from the control panel on the right side of your screen. Another reminder, the transcript and audio recording for today's webinar will be available in the coming days on our PeerTA network website, and you see that link on the screen before you. If you have any webinar topics that you'd like to hear more about in the future, please send us your ideas to the PeerTA at PeerTA at ICF.com link. So again, thank you again. And as the webinar closes out, although we are a little bit over time, a survey will launch. We'd ask you to complete that. And that will help us give us some feedback as to how we can do future webinars. Please take a couple of minutes to do that. So thanks again to everyone for joining us today. We look forward to your participation in our future webinars and enjoy the remainder of your day. Thank you so much.